I am Mary Coghlan, and professionally I am something of a hybrid, I would say. I have been variously an actuary, a doctor, and erstwhile sports administrator. Currently I work in consulting, where I hope that I manage to combine the various skills and experience that I have attained over a number of years to make the world a little bit of a better place. I should add, of course, very importantly, that I am also a mom to the most wonderful 6-year-old in the world, and I do a little bit of running as well. So if you ask me to describe who I am and the things that I suppose fill my days, those will be the things that spring to mind immediately. In terms of how did I get here? Well, I suppose I probably took something of a circuitous route. It is, I suppose, nearly by definition going to be a circuitous route given the kind of somewhat eclectic nature of what I have done. I started off as a teenager who had a few ideas about what they wanted to do, and ultimately took a bit of a jump off a cliff in terms of making a decision about what to actually do. And I became a trainee actuary when I was 17 years old. I then went on to qualify as a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries and practiced as an actuary for a number of years and really enjoyed that. At some point I decided, because I had gone straight into actuarial training at a young age and hadn't really had a college experience, I decided that I was going to go back and have that experience at a slightly older age. So I did a maths degree in Oxford when I was in my 20s, and I enjoyed that to the max for sure. And I then went back and became an actuary again for another few years, and I drifted into, well, no, drifted is the wrong word, but I made a decision to move into sports administration briefly due to my own interest in athletics and the fact that I had been a board member in the Athletics Association in this country. And when I was done with that, I had a big re-evaluation, and I thought back to the time when I was a teenager, all those years previously, in my 30s at this point, I should point out, that I thought that I would go back and do medicine. It sounds kind of glib. It wasn't glib at all. It was a big decision clearly at that point in my life, but it was something I was always interested in and passionate about, and delighted that I did it. And I went back to college in the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin, and I became a doctor and went on and practiced clinical medicine for a number of years. After that, well, not after that, there was no end to it as such, but I had my son in that time period also. And I came to a bit of a crossroads, another one you might say. I came to a bit of a crossroads where I thought, well, you know, in terms of my priorities, what were they? And whereas my professional priorities have always been really high, I decided that in the interest of family life, and also in the interest of optimizing all my skills, which included obviously the actuarial in my past and the medical in my present at the time, that I would try to combine those, and I moved into a career in consulting. And that's where I am now, and that's what I'm really enjoying at the moment. So I think that probably explains a little bit about the journey of where I am right now. What do I care about? What gets me up in the morning? Well, ultimately it's quite simple for me. What I really care about is the fact that when my son grows up, that the world will be a better place, and that he will have opportunities that are better, and that he can look forward to a life that is filled with those opportunities in the best possible way. So what does that actually mean? Well, I suppose you could split it into a number of things. In terms of my professional life, but also my personal life, what are the things that really matter to me? What really matters to me is integrity. What really matters to me is authenticity. What really matters to me is quality. when I work with anybody, when I work with a team, when I work for somebody, alternatively, the first and foremost thing that matters to me is integrity. If you don't have integrity, you don't have anything in my book. And you know what, if you've got 100% integrity and 80% quality, I can totally live with that. Ultimately, I think integrity and authenticity are so important. In terms of, I suppose, how I enact that in my day-to-day, there's one thing I always think about in terms of how I interact with other people. And I suppose this probably goes back to my clinical medical days. And my goal always with every patient, but not just patients, every person I encountered in a hospital environment where I worked, was that after any interaction with me, that their day will be a little bit better. Now, that isn't always possible, obviously, in that situation, because you know what, some days you're telling people really terrible news and you have to reframe a little bit in that context. The hope is that you can do it in a way that is the least painful way possible for them. But those are exceptions, really. So by and large, my goal is that every interaction I have with another human leads to their day being a little bit better and a little bit brighter. And obviously that depends on the situation, whether it's a professional or personal situation. But I think if you go into every personal transaction with that mindset and come back to it when things are going wrong, I think that it really, for me anyway, it's very helpful. What are my kind of, I live by these various kind of sayings, for want of a better word. One of my favorite things also to consider is walk a mile in my shoes. You never ever know what anybody is going through. You never know what they have come through already. You never know just that they've had a really bad morning or whatever it is. You just don't know. And therefore, walk a mile in my shoes really just says you need to consider what other people might be going through. The other thing I always say is give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and it's really part of the same picture. You don't know what's going on with people, and give them the benefit of the doubt. And if they react in a particular way to you, it's not about you, it's about them. Something terrible has happened to them, or something bad has happened to them, or they've had an experience that has been a negative experience that has made them react that way. And again, none of us are perfect, and we can't always not react to something which we see as being negative, but I just try and keep those things in mind. A few years ago, a doctor in the UK who herself was unfortunately diagnosed with terminal cancer started a campaign, and it's called #MyNameIs. And she discovered that when she went into the medical system as a patient, that quite a lot of the time people didn't even introduce themselves to her. Now, that maybe it's particularly a problem in the medical environment, but in general in life, I think it's a very good, principle to live by, that everybody who you meet, to make eye contact. I was going to say shake hands, but we can't do that anymore. But to make eye contact and say, hello, my name is, and encourage that open conversation to begin with. So I would say those are, again, maybe an eclectic bunch of values, but I find them really helpful. And ultimately, as I said, the personal and professional goal and aim that I am driven by is to make the world a little bit of a better place, that so when my child and when all of our children get older, that it is a better place for them to live in. Can the world ever be the same again? I don't think that's really the question at all. Should the world ever be the same again? Of course it shouldn't, because if we can't learn from this essentially profound experience that the planet has had, we're not really in a very good place. I hear people talking about going back to what it was like in January 2020, and I think to myself, why would we want to do that? What have we learned? It's actually really important to me. It's something I'm pretty passionate about already. I think that we, in the hard lockdown days where we really weren't able to move far from home, etc., that was a tough time. But if you went out for a walk and the streets were quiet, there was something about that quiet that was very interesting. And I think that maybe it was a bit eerie, maybe it was a bit too much, but maybe there was some value in it as well. So I think that there are lots of reasons why we shouldn't be trying to go back to where we were before. I'm passionate about healthcare myself, unsurprisingly, and I think that this creates the opportunity like never before to transform how we deliver health care to our population. I think we don't have to worry about, we shouldn't be worrying about incremental changes. We should be thinking about what can we do that's revolutionary. What can we do to, we in this country have been inclined to beat up on our health services. I think this is an opportunity for us to recreate and reimagine and reinvent our health services in a way that means that, we will be proud of them as a country. I think that our system's response to the emergency has, not been without maybe errors and flaws and mistakes in places, but I think it has been overall of the highest quality. I think we have been shown leadership in this country, which has certainly, made me very proud to feel part of it in some small way. We see examples of where what we have done in this country now being used internationally. We're not used to that in this space. We're used to, everybody going, oh, we've done a terrible job, or not great job, or whatever. But now we have seen some exemplars of the opposite. So I think that we should take confidence from that. We should take motivation from that, and we should use it for the future of healthcare in this country. That's health. The economy, I suppose it's inevitable. It would appear that we're about to enter a recession, that there's going to be hard times ahead. I think, though, that reimagine and reinvent comes into play here. We were able to put in place measures, emergency measures, to help people out. Again, probably not perfect in many instances, but we were able to do it. Well, what about the other side of it? Can we reimagine and reinvent a little bit to figure out a way to deal with that and to deal with those decisions that doesn't place us into a terrible place economically? I think from the point of view of climate, it's a bit of a shot across definitely a bit of a shot across the bow that in terms of climate change. This is what is ahead of us in terms of drastic measures that will be required in our future in order to, sustain humanity on this planet if we don't really take the action that's required in terms of climate change. And I think that, again, this should be the opportunity to draw the line into the sand and to say we are dead serious about this. And the world, I suppose the world, you think about it in the sense of travelling, we won't think of travelling the same, I think, for a very long time, if ever again. We will and should, I think, always question the need to utilise air travel, for example. And obviously that's going to be very tough for that industry, and it's very hard to see a time, when it will come back to the pre-COVID levels of activity. And certainly a big challenge, but I think it's certainly somewhere where the world is going to. But fundamentally, my belief is that, we should not be trying to get back to where we were. We need to take what we have learned from this experience and we need to use it for the good of ourselves, for the good of our quality of living, for the good of humanity in general, and for the good of our children. And I will passionately advocate for that, and none of this talk about going back to or wanting to go back to exactly where we were in January 2020. What does the future hold? Well, I refer you back to my previous comments on uncertainty. So really, I haven't landed on a view as to what the future holds and how it might have been different had there never been such thing as COVID-19. In to some extent trivial ways, the future will be different to the extent that maybe there won't be foreign holidays for the next year or two. That's okay. Obviously, it's again a first world problem. I suppose for our children, their experience, is going to be different depending on what age they are. Their experience of school is going to be different. To them, they've now experienced something which they don't know it is a once in every 100-year event. To them, it's something that might happen every few years because that's what they've seen given their lifespan, so they'll have a different perspective of it. There'll be more working from home. There will be definitely less sitting in traffic unnecessarily on the M50, in my opinion. There certainly should be less in any case. But overall, we don't know what the future holds, and in a way, I don't want to get too invested in what it might hold, because I think there is so much that we still don't know about what impact the virus will have on us, and we need to sit tight a little bit and take a deep breath. And if we're lucky enough to be in a situation where we have a job, where we have a roof over our heads, where we have food on the table, I think we just have to try and kind of breathe slowly and make the most of the situation and do the things we can do that we enjoy doing and plan them as much as we can, but to try and just kind of maintain the perspective that we're not really sure what's going to happen. How has COVID changed my life? Well, fundamentally, how COVID has changed my life is it has removed the certainty. And I didn't even know there was certainty there beforehand. I took it so much for granted, but it has definitely taken that away. And I suppose I feel I'm standing on sand now in comparison to the granite I was standing on 6 months ago. I suppose that's the high level, the overview of how it has changed my life. And I suppose then the next step in that, of course, is hopefully it has meant that I am able to deal with the uncertainty and the instability a little bit better, which I think it's good to be able to deal with those things that as humans I think that we frequently are not great at dealing with. We like the routine, we like the certainty. Although I suppose routine is one thing we've probably had quite a lot of over the last 5 or 6 months. In terms of the normal day-to-day stuff, for me, it has been probably very similar to hundreds, thousands, millions, maybe even a couple of billion people, I'd say at this point. I've been working from home. I've been really lucky. My job has been relatively secure to date. I've been extremely busy. I have been working in an area that's very much related to basically the national effort, in a sense, I suppose, with regard to managing the pandemic. And it's been a privilege to have some small involvement with that and to be able to use my skills to help in some small way. So that has been, as I say, a privilege to be able to do that in a small part. I suppose the challenges have been, again, when the schools in Ireland closed on the 12th of March, children at home from that point. I think all of us who are parents, and particularly parents of younger children, have found that particularly challenging. I think it must be incredibly difficult, especially for parents of my son is 6, but for children who are even younger than 6, I think that that it obviously is even more difficult as they require much more hands-on attention. So that has definitely obviously been a change. How has it affected the people I care about? My father is in his 70s. Obviously his life is very kind of constrained and restrained, and he himself would articulate that he feels that this period is such a significant proportion of his future life, and it's kind of, I suppose it's a relative point that we all have a different lens through which we view this. I think that working from home is positive in many ways. And I think that it's something that will be very interesting for the future also. It has taught me, as well as probably or hopefully a better toolkit for dealing with uncertainty, it has also taught me appreciation, and I think more patience, and also the realization that, you know what, especially when shops and businesses were closed down, the realization that it's okay not to have everything absolutely on tap at every hour, every moment, every day. That's not for 1 second taking away from, obviously, the terrible situation where people lost their jobs. And I say I have uncertainty, but obviously the uncertainty for a lot of people is much greater than the uncertainty I face myself. The things that I care about, the maybe material or experiential things that I care about, well, you know what, missed my holiday to Boston this year, missed being able to run the Dublin Marathon this year, but you know what, they're first world problems, and I will more than get over them, in terms of the big picture.